Okay, let's read Genesis chapter 26, beginning in verse 1. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. So Isaac went to Gerar, to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, and the Lord appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. And I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and will give your descendants all these lands, and by your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So Isaac lived in Gerar. When the men of that place asked about his wife, he said, She is my sister. For he was afraid to say, My wife, thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. And it came about, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out through a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing his wife Rebekah. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, certainly she is your wife. How then did you say, She is my sister? And Isaac said to him, Because I said, lest I die on account of her. And Abimelech said, What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech charged all the people, saying, He who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Now Isaac sowed in that land, and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man became rich and continued to grow richer until he became very wealthy. For he had possessions of flocks and herds and of great household, so that the Philistines envied him. Now all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines stopped up by filling them with earth. Then Abimelech said to Isaac, Go away from us, for you are too powerful for us. And Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Then Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the same names which his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of flowing water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with the herdsmen of Isaac, saying, The water is ours. So he named the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then he dug another well, and they quarreled over it, so he named it Sitnah. And he moved away from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it, so he named it Rehoboth. For he said, At last the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. Then he went up from there to Beersheba. And the Lord appeared to him that same night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. Then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with an advisor, his advisor Ahazath, and Phicol, the commander of his army. And Isaac said to them, Why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you? And they said, We see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we said, Let there now be an oath between us, even between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord." Then he made a feast, and they ate and drank. And in the morning they arose early and exchanged oaths. Then Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. Now it came about on the same day that Isaac's servants came in and told him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. And when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. Okay. Some of that may have sounded like deja vu. I know. So we'll go back and look at some of those other accounts also. So back in Genesis chapter 26, in verse 1. Now there was a famine in the land besides the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. So Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go to Egypt. Stay in the land of which I shall tell you." And so God, back in Genesis chapter 12, right after Abraham and Sarah had come to the land of Canaan, in Genesis 12, starting in verse 10, and this is Abraham and Sarah. And it says, "Now there was a famine in the land, so Abraham went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. And it came about when he came near to Egypt that he said to Sarah his wife, 'See now, I know that you are a beautiful woman, and it will come about when the Egyptians see you that they will say, "This is his wife," and they will kill me, but they will let you live.'" So this must have, from what I read and understand, when another man comes in, a king would take the wife and add him to her harem, and it was very much a political thing. And the greater the person whose wife you took, the greater, I guess, I don't know, status, or I don't know. So this was a common practice, which, and I think it's very interesting, and I don't know why this is. I never read anything that helped me understand it, but why it would be okay to take another man's wife, but not his sister. I don't know, but anyway, I guess it was just a status symbol to take another man's wife. Evidently. Evidently they would kill the man and then take the wife. But they wouldn't touch his sister, so I don't know. Well, except maybe they would, but they just wouldn't kill the man. Because both cases they gave her back.
And they made it about nobody had money.
Yes, exactly. So maybe they took women, whether sister or wife, but one spared the husband.
Because didn't Sarah get taken?
Yes, Sarah and Rebecca. Sarah. Yes, Sarah twice. And so I guess they would take them, even if they were sisters. They just wouldn't
my little
kill.
note says
What does it say?
that the Egyptians respected marriage. This is funny. So they would feel compelled to kill Abraham, taking his wife into Pharaoh's harem.
Okay,
They
well, there
respected
you go.
marriage, but they didn't respect life.
So some things never change, right? The logic. Yeah.
Go figure.
Okay, well, there you go. So this happened in Egypt, but notice how Abraham went on down into Egypt, and with Isaac he said, "Do not go to Egypt," so very specifically. And then the other case, I just wanted to read it since it's been a long time. It's in Genesis chapter 20. In Genesis chapter 20, just to recap this and kind of put it in context, in chapter 18, the Lord had appeared to Abraham and said, "In a year you're going to have a son." So when this takes place in chapter 20, it's in the months prior to conception. So this little, 3-month window is when this took place. And in the meantime, Sodom and Gomorrah have been utterly destroyed. And just a refresher, and for those of you that weren't here, when we were trying to find Sodom and Gomorrah on the map, no one knows exactly where it was, because when he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, I mean, there's not an artifact left. I mean, it is so destroyed that no one's really sure, but we have a couple of clues, and one is the city that where Lot was told to flee, Zoar, so it's close to Zoar, and then also there's now I can't remember how big, but there's a salt pillar. I want to say it's like 300 feet, a salt pillar. So they kind of think that was near Zoar, and that could have been the area. But there are no artifacts. I mean, he utterly destroyed. I mean, they're gone, like gone. And so where this Abimelech was, I mean, it would have been hard to not notice Sodom and Gomorrah. It said the smoke and the flames came up or the smoke rose like a furnace, like coming out of a furnace. And if you've ever been where they burn something and the ash that just falls, it would be hard to not notice that. So when Abraham comes to this area, God's destroyed that, and it was, a sign, a warning for all of us. But they respected Abraham, had a little bit of fear of God in them after that. And so this is in that little window of time. So Genesis chapter 20. Now Abraham journeyed from there toward the land. Wait, did I have all of it? Yeah. Toward the land of the Negev, and settled between Kadesh and Shur. Then he sojourned to Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." So Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream of the night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man, because of the woman you have taken. She is married." Now Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, "Lord, wilt thou slay a nation, even though blameless? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she herself said, 'He is my brother.' In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that in the integrity of your heart you have done this, and I also kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now, therefore, restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." And then we can skip down to verse 12. And this is where we find out, here's a little bit of a difference. Abraham says, "Besides, she actually is my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came about when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said to her, 'This is the kindness which you shall show to me. Everywhere we go, say me, he is my brother.'" So we find out Sarah really is a half-sister, and that they share Terah as a father. They have different moms, but Terah was the dad. So the case of Rebecca and Isaac, she's not really even a half-sister, but Sarah was actually a half-sister.
And these Abimelechs, they're probably not the same, because Abimelech was a kind of a title like Pharaoh.
That's what they think. It was a title. And same way with Pekol, because we saw him also. So they think it was like a Pharaoh, a title. And we'll put some timeline perspective on this in a minute. But, yeah, exactly. I'm glad you clarified that. So it's not really the same man.
Well, when I read it the first time, I was like, he never learns.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for pointing that out there, because that is very true. It's probably not the same one. So then, I'm going to finish reading out the chapter. Abimelech, beginning verse 14. Abimelech then took sheep and oxen and male and female servants and gave them to Abraham and restored his wife Sarah to him. And Abimelech said, "Behold, my land is before you. Settle wherever you please." And to Sarah he said, "Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, it is your vindication before all who are with you, and before all men you are cleared." And Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maids, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed fast all the wombs of the household of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife.
So how long did he have Sarah there? If
It couldn't. I mean, time-wise, it couldn't. I know. I wondered the same thing, but it seems like it couldn't have been more than 3 months because she hadn't conceived yet. It's in that window. So
Because the way it reads
I
until you get
know.
to that point is like it's overnight or within like 2-3 days. But
yes,
You see so much of that though, where it seems like it happens overnight.
Yes,
in Scripture,
exactly.
And it's really,
a longer period of time. Yeah, because for them to know that they're. And then another difference is in this passage, God warns Abimelech in a dream at night, and the other one he's going to oversee something. So, anyway, just a few differences, but very similar stories.
And I think it's interesting in that time that procreation was so important.
It's huge.
Because it's building empires and obtaining land.
Yes.
It doesn't have anything to do with love of family. It has to do with power.
Yes,
And
building
position.
nations, absolutely. It was to make a powerful, strong, powerful nation, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And then since we're right here, just skip down to 20. We're going to put a timeline to all of this. So in chapter 21, Isaac is born. And just I want you to make a note in 21:5 that Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. And we covered this 2 weeks ago, but then I forgot to mention it again last week. So if you'll think back to last week's lesson, so in Genesis chapter 25, verse 26, Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. So that would have made Abraham 160 years old when the twins were born. And then if you look up in Genesis 25:7, Abraham lived to be 175 years. So he actually lived until the boys were 15. So, I mean, just the way 25 reads, I think it's easy to assume Abraham died before the twins were born. But he actually lived through 15 years of their life. So that brings us to chapter 26. So 26 takes place after the death of Abraham. And so the boys are older. Which, I mean, that was, how do you not look like a wife if you've got little kids running around? So they would have been much older. Okay, so that's some timelines and some history. And so they were told not to go to Egypt. So now picking up back in Genesis chapter 26, verse 3. And God is telling Isaac, don't go to Egypt, but sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish my oath, which I swore to your father Abraham. And so up to this point, it's just been given to Abraham. And so it's not a personal thing with, he knows, and it's been passed on, but we're going to see God's going to make it very personal at the end of the chapter. And then verse 4, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and I will give your descendants all these lands, and by your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. And we know that is the gospel in a nutshell, and it's what we talked about last week. So to whosoever will. Your genealogy matters not. It's whosoever will believe in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And so, and we saw, Rahab the Canaanite. We're going to talk about them again, but just a reminder. So this is the gospel, and it's all pointing toward Christ. And again, everything in Scripture is moving us towards reconciliation. And then, I don't know, we've talked about this so much before, but just as a little side note, just like Sarah being after the promise of Isaac, she be within a year, and then she's taken by this king, and then God said, I kept you from sinning against me. So just as everything, God is moving us towards reconciliation. You can bet from Genesis 3 until Revelation 20, Satan is doing everything in his power to thwart the plan of salvation. So at this point, if he can destroy the nation of Israel, well, then the Messiah can't come. And so, like when we studied Noah and the flood, so Satan had a big target, and it's mankind, because he didn't know where the seed was going to come from. But then once we have Abraham, it narrows the focus, because you know it's going to be Israelites going to come from that genealogy. So if he can wipe the Jews off the face of the earth, then he can thwart the Messiah, and then salvation won't be possible. So that's always his agenda. So we talked about that when if Sarah had been touched in any way, then that would have tainted that lineage. And so God was protecting it. And I think that's probably like what I walked away with most after this, is God's purposes will be fulfilled, and Satan cannot stop the plan of salvation. And I mean, it's just God is able to do that which He's promised, and He promised to bring about the Messiah, and that all nations would be blessed through Him. And through all these obstacles, the plan of salvation will not be thwarted. Okay, verse 5. This was so interesting. I'm going to read it again. I'm going to read 3, 4, and 5 again. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you, for to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. And I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and I will give your descendants all these lands, and by your descendants all nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. And so that was like, I didn't want that because to be there, because the covenant is so unconditional. Like, Abraham was asleep, actually, when he was in a deep sleep. This is so unconditional, and it's so not dependent on, it's just what we just said, it's so not dependent on Abraham to bring about salvation. It was so, everything was dependent on God. So that word bothered me. But then I looked it up, and it was so fascinating. And you can, it's in here. You can look it up on your in your Blue Letter Bible if you have that app. But it's the word, because it's like consequently, or as a consequence. So because God made these promises, Abraham was able to obey, and it was or because of the promises, Abraham obeyed. When we looked at Noah and the ark, so you had Genesis chapter 6, and it said God had favor on Noah, and then Noah was blameless in the sight of the Lord. God didn't have favor on Noah because he was blameless. Because of God's amazing grace, Noah was able to obey. Oh my goodness. We are born with the most stubborn, well, I will say I was, I don't know better. Stubborn, hard-headed, rebellious nature you have ever. Well, I think we're all born that way. You tell a child don't touch, and that's the first thing they want to do. We're just born so rebellious. So it's only because of God's amazing grace that we could ever have an obedient heart. That is such contrary to our flesh nature to even want to obey, because we really want to do opposite. So it's only because of God's amazing grace that we could even desire obedience. It's His amazing grace. And so here, because of this, we could say consequently. I think even the King James says, because of that, Abraham obeyed my voice. So when we talk about Abraham obeying, I'm trying not to reteach everything we've done, but we just want to touch on these points. So when we talk about the faith of Abraham, and Abraham being able to sacrifice Isaac, the only way Abraham was able to do that is because God had promised it's through Abraham's descendants that through his seed that you'll be reckoned. So he was so clear. He said Isaac by name, it will be through Isaac. So when God said, I want you to sacrifice Isaac, Abraham didn't even hesitate, because Isaac wasn't married yet, and he hadn't had children yet, and he had the promise of God that it was through Abraham's seed. So in Hebrews chapter 11 tells us Abraham had reasoned in his head that he was going to witness a resurrection from the dead. And so that's why, because he was so fully persuaded that God was able to do that which he had promised, he didn't even hesitate to obey. He didn't say, oh my goodness, if I sacrifice him, then how are you going to fulfill your promise? He didn't try to help God out. Well, I'm not going to sacrifice him, and you can't do what you said you do. No, God is fully able to do that which he has promised, and it's not dependent on us. And Abraham could just go, sacrifice Isaac, and expect that Isaac was going to somehow be able to reproduce after that. And he didn't have to understand exactly what God was doing. He just knew he would. The how didn't matter, just the fact that he had promised it, and that God's word is so sure that if he says it, it will be. And so that's what he's saying here. So it's because he had the promise that is through Isaac, he didn't even hesitate to sacrifice him. He trusted God that much. And I mean, we talk about this. We're all in the process. Shane used that analogy in church and I just think about it all the time. We're under construction. We'll be under construction till we are in the grave or raptured, but we are under construction. But this is an area that we need to be just like measuring, and look, our level of obedience is directly related to our level of faith. So as our trust in God grows, then our obedience is just, we don't have to wonder how God's going to bring it about. Well, if I'm sacrificing, how are you going to do what you said? It doesn't matter. If he said sacrificing, he'll worry with the details. And so it's just that trust. And so hopefully we're growing when we read that's why we're in his word every week together. We're reading it, and I hope that your confidence in his ability to do what he's promised is just growing every week, and we just encourage each other in his word that he will do what he said he would do. And he's so faithful, and his word is so sure. So does anyone have any thoughts or questions on? Okay. And so then we have verse 6. So Isaac lived in Gerar. And this is the land of the Philistines. Verse 7. When the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, she is my sister. And like I said, in Sarah's case, she really was a half-sister. Rebecca, not so. Not so much. I think they're like first cousins once removed or something, but not a sister. And then he explains why he said that. For he was afraid to say, my wife, thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebecca, for she is beautiful. And so, verse 8. And it came about when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out through a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing his wife, Rebekah. And I don't know what all that meant, but whatever Abimelech saw, he's like, that is not appropriate behavior between a brother and a sister. That is a wife. So they were doing husband-wife things. And
evidently, Isaac didn't know that he was being watched.
Exactly. No, he had no idea.
Because he was under fear of death.
Yes, he was. That's a very good
Well,
point.
how close was he?
I don't know. We
for
just
the
don't
king to be able
know.
to look out and see you.
I don't know.
Back alley.
I have
I
no
thought he lived
idea.
out in the kind of in tents and stuff. So
I don't know.
And make out.
Well, since he's been there for a long time, so he may
Yeah,
have, because it
gotten a
goes
little
on
more
to tell how
comfortable.
he continues to improve his wealth and everything. So by this point, he may have already started that and moved closer to the king.
Okay.
So, I mean, again, we were saying how things go quicker than it sounds
Yes.
in the scripture.
Yes.
So.
And and he'd been there long enough that he was comfortable. You know, you just get kind of comfortable and you kind of let your guard down when it's been a while and nothing's happened, so you let your guard down. And so I don't know how long, but, when the Bible said he'd been there a long time, he was there a long time. But I don't know how long. And then verse 9, then Abimelech called Isaac and he said, behold, certainly she is your wife. And it's just interesting that the last time God told him in a dream, and then this time he allows him to just stumble upon this. And, how then did you say she is my sister? And Isaac said, because I said, lest I die on her account. So very honest, it's self-preservation. It's so basic to human nature. He just wanted to survive. And Abimelech said, "What is this that you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So we were talking about this. I hadn't thought about it, but I'll share with you how interesting that in this culture that it was wrong to lay with another man's wife, and they knew it. I mean, it was, you just knew you did it. That was wrong. And then this guilt that I don't know what he meant by the guilt that you brought up, but it is so serious that if anyone, well, let's read the next verse. So Abimelech charged all the people, saying, "He who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." So whatever this guilt was, I mean, Abimelech didn't want it brought on his
Well,
people.
if the previous Abimelech, 75 years earlier, had experienced something to the point that God came to him in a dream and had stopped all women from being
Yes.
able to have children, that would continue in stories.
Yes.
And so it may have expanded into something even bigger than what it actually was. And so it would become kind of a story of absolute do not ever do this
Yes.
with this type of a culture. And they probably knew Isaac was Abraham's son.
Yes.
And if Abraham had been in the previous story, then
Yes.
he's like,
Yes,
danger.
exactly. That is a very
Well,
good
did the
point.
people know about the wombs, or is that just something the Bible told us? I mean, how could they have ever really known?
I don't know. That's why I don't know. I thought that was interesting. That's why I thought they had to have been there a while, like maybe, to know.
Something's
We're
going
not
on.
reproducing. No one in this area is reproducing, and that's a little weird, So I wondered about that. I just don't know. I don't know. He said something. He said, "For I am a dead man." Where did he say that? It was. Okay, in chapter 20, verse 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream of the night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man." So I think that might have been what he was talking about, barren. Yeah, because of the woman. So maybe. Yeah, but what? Yeah, I don't know. But you're right. That story probably. Yeah, I mean that along with the Sodom and Gomorrah going up, and those things did have a way of preceding Israel, so they had a reputation once they arrived. Anyway, if they were men of God, as being men of God. Okay, so whatever. They knew this was wrong. They knew it would bring guilt upon them. And from the top down, do not touch this man or his wife. And it was a death penalty at this point. Abimelech, death penalty if you do that. Okay, and then verse 12. Now Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. So we started the chapter with a famine, and now we've got him reaping 100-fold. And is that unusual to have to do that well in a year? To plant and reap 100-fold. in
Oh,
one?
yeah, I think that's kind of unusual.
I would think that would
they
be.
just keep growing after
Well-
they harvest, or what?
Well, let's take wheat, for example. You plant wheat, one grain of wheat will make a stalk. But how many heads will there be on that stalk? So it could be that it's more than 100 times, because there'd be maybe 30 grain in one head,
Wow.
or there might not be but 10,
Wow.
depending
Okay.
on weather conditions, soil,
Yes.
rain, whatever.
I mean, farming, everything is dependent on God. You're just so at His
Everything.
mercy. You can't make it rain.
It's
You can't make it
everything,
stop
yeah.
raining. Yeah. This is from our wheat and tares, Matthew chapter 13. Dr. McMahon brought us in some wheat and
I need to
tares.
bring you some more wheat. That was kind of puny. I have to wait till next year.
Okay. Oh, I think
Wheat's
it looks
on the
good.
right.
The wheat's on the top.
Uh-huh. Okay. So he sowed in the land and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him as He promised He would. And the man became rich and continued to grow richer until he became very wealthy. And just, the Bible does not exaggerate. And so when he has things like this, and says it 3 times in 3 different ways, I mean, this was a very, very, very wealthy man. Verse 14, for he had possessions of flocks and herds and a great household. And that, I think the household has to do with the number of servants that he had in his household, more than, obviously, they had just the 2 boys. So the Philistines envied him. So, verse 15. Now all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines stopped up by filling them with earth. And just because that's followed by the Philistines envied them, it makes it sound like it was probably out of spite. And just so, like, when God has so abundantly blessed them, it's just, let's do whatever we can to, keep God from blessing them, or to destroy them or harm them.
And it's obvious they didn't have as much success as he did.
Well, even the fact that he mentioned 100-fold in 1 year, I thought if you mention it like that, it must have been an unusual.
They're probably standing back thinking,
I know.
we
Yeah.
planted the same time, the same area, the same weather.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and I also read that this was a really big deal if you filled in somebody's well. And I mean, just thinking about it, they didn't have all the equipment that we have today. I don't know what all was involved in digging a well. And then also, I've just known people in current that you dig and dig and dig and you never reach water. I mean, just knowing.
Oh, we don't know what the water table was there, so
I
how far they
know.
had to dig.
But they were all hand dug,
They
They
were-
were all hand dug,
yes.
so however deep it was, and think how dangerous that is. Because maybe they knew about shoring up the sides to keep it from caving in, I don't know.
I don't know. But it was, it had to have been work, like to dig a well. And so his father, Abraham, had already dug these, but they went in and filled them. And this was also a cause of many a war, from what I read, between people groups. If you fill in their well, that's their life source, is water. And so to fill that in, that would have been huge. And
Today, if wells get filled in for whatever reason, maliciously or just because of nature and ground changes and so forth, they usually just move over and dig a new beside it rather than repairing the old.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so then verse 16, then Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are too powerful for us. So I guess they realized, Isaac's response, he did not go to war against them, but they did run him off, told him to leave, because they're too powerful.
It's interesting that they're fighting over water here.
I know.
Think about Texas and Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Fighting over who the Red River belongs to, or the water in the Red River. And how many disputes have there been over the history of even Oklahoma, much less the country,
Yes.
over you've got a well, that should be for all of us. You didn't make the water. It just happened to
Yes.
be on your land.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Chris just finished reading The Grapes of Wrath.
Yes.
And that was a huge factor why people had to
Oh,
leave.
yes.
They couldn't find water. And these communities would just, disappear. And it's very interesting also because in the news, even as we speak, Altus,
Yes.
they've depended on Lake Lugert for so long and they're
nothing.
running out of water. Communities will just go away, which kind of made me think that was the Philistines' hope. We plug their wells and they'll just disappear. And of course, and we've talked about that. We know the enemy behind that. And he, anything to get rid of Israel. So yeah, they were. Okay. So then Abimelech tells him to go away. In verse 17, and Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Verse 18. So, this, just FYI, how Isaac doesn't retaliate, and when he's asked to leave, he just leaves. He had whatever he had planted that field there, they just leave, they move somewhere else, settle somewhere else. Then verse 18, then Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham. So it's what you're saying. They would have been, very interesting that they would go back. Or do you think they just went right next to because they knew it was
They probably
successful?
went right next to it, depending.
Yeah, that's
Because they already knew water was there.
exactly.
It
Yes.
wasn't like they were having to search
Yes.
for a likely spot for water.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is a translation issue or not, but my translation says he reopened the wells that his father
Oh,
had dug.
okay. Well,
Okay,
that's
so they may
interesting.
have just cleaned them out.
Maybe.
Mhm. Wow. But they didn't. They don't do that now because it's so much hard. It's more work.
Yeah.
It was way more work.
Most of the time, they would just dig in there.
Yeah.
Well, but think about the tools we use now versus, I mean, they were hand digging. So if the well is already established, it's probably easier to just know the boundaries of the well and to dig it out again. Whereas now with the tools we use, we would
Yeah.
end up destroying the well walls and things like that probably. So,
A hand dug well would be big enough. I have 3 of them in my front yard. 2 of them were dry, and Grandpa finally got one. But it's big enough around for a man to fit down in with a bucket. And somebody up on top, he'd fill a bucket of dirt, and somebody'd pull it up. So
Wow.
it was big enough around.
Oh, my
it wasn't just
goodness.
a little hole like we
Right.
have now that people drill.
That is so interesting.
How did he do the walls?
The walls were rock.
Mm.
Put rock in there. And
Did
Just
you do that
as you
after
go?
dig, or
Yeah.
right?
Well,
As
I think
you
it was
go?
after they
Okay.
kind of sealed off the
yeah,
sides.
because you have to start at the bottom of it
Yeah.
to get it up, don't you?
Mm.
Because there
Wow.
was no way to do it any other way. And I don't even know how deep that is. The water is not good water. And I'm assuming that this was good water. On my hill, it's called gyp water. It's because of the kind of rocks that are on my hill.
Really?
It's really not good for almost anything.
Use it for plants or anything?
You can't use it on plants. It will make livestock sick.
See?
Yeah.
This would be good to put a fire out.
You have to put a fire out.
What about it?
Oh, wow. That is just.
Well, thanks, Blaine.
Thank you so much for your insight. That is so helpful.
There's lots of wells dug around here that aren't fit to drink, aren't there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess if you boiled it, it'd be okay.
I'm sorry.
If you boiled it.
You know, I'm thinking grandmother boiled it, and then they also let it sit out in the sun. And I know our
Here's
neighbor
hard boiled if you let it sit out in the sun.
thought his other neighbors were trying to poison his well because there was always an oily scum on the top of his water. Come to find out, he had a gas well. He had hit gas when he dug his well. He didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until years, and the man was dead. And his grandson, they came in and surveyed and wanted to do some drilling exploration. And they said, "You've got a big gas well down there."
So he got wealthy off of grandfather's well?
Got wealthy off of grandfather's water well.
Wow.
But he was German, and he thought back during World War I that they were trying to poison him.
Oh, how sad.
Yes.
They tend to be suspicious.
Do they?
Back then.
Well, yeah.
Well,
back
then,
yeah.
yes. Oh, my
Now,
God.
too.
I mean,
They're cautious, I think.
Yeah.
they were just right across the neighbors of my grandfather, and kids went to school together. But you know, he was very suspicious. Who would do that to
That is
his
so
well?
interesting.
Who was trying to drive him out?
That is so. So that is a reason someone would do that to
Yes.
a well. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, that is so interesting. Okay. Let me read verse 18 again. Then Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the same names which his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of flowing water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with the herdsmen of Isaac, saying, "The water is ours." So he named the well Asik, because they contended with him. And I think Asik just means, yes, dispute.
Contention.
Yes. Yeah, Asik, contention. And then, I know, so it's just what you're saying. You did the work, which, you're right, even today. But you dug the well, but the water isn't exclusive to any one person.
And it stopped them up. Sometimes if they weren't careful with the digging, they would stop the flow of the water, and it would it finds its course of least resistance. And so it might have been flowing through there, but if it's accidentally somehow got blocked, it would just go another way, and you might or might not find where it went.
That's, yeah. Okay. Well, here they were. They found flowing water, and then the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with the herdsmen of Isaac, saying, "The water's ours." So he named it Esek because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over it too. So he named it Sitnah, which means strife. And he moved away from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he named it Rehoboth, for he said, "At last the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." So, he never fights, he never retaliates, just keeps. And that would have been so much work to hand dig a well.
This version says the first well was named Quarrel, and the second one Hostility, and the third one Open Spaces.
Oh, how interesting.
So
Yeah.
nice idea of that.
Yeah. This translation is contention, strife, and then wide places or wide streets. And then, plus that was a way of kind of moving Isaac, I guess, wherever he was. So he finally digs a well, finds water, and he says, "At last the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land."
So God may have been allowing that to happen to get him out farther.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Then they went up from there to Beersheba, and I wanted us to go back and look. Beersheba was named when Abraham and Abimelech. So in the first part of chapter 21, Isaac is born, and then in beginning verse so Genesis chapter 21, beginning in verse 22. It says, "Now it came about at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, spoke to Abraham, saying, 'God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore, swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, or with my offspring, or with my posterity. For according to the kindness I have shown you, you shall show to me and to the land in which you have sojourned.' And Abraham said, 'I swear it.' But Abraham complained to Abimelech because of the well of water which the servants of Abimelech had seized. And Abimelech said, 'I do not know who has done this thing, neither did you tell me, nor did I hear of it until today.' And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. Then Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of flock by themselves, and Abimelech said to Abraham, 'What do these 7 ewe lambs mean, which you have set by themselves?' And he said, 'You shall take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand, in order that it may be a witness to me that I dug this well.' Therefore he called the place Beersheba, because there the two of them took an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba, and Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, arose and returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a tamarisk tree at Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the land of the Philistines for many days." So, beer just translates well. Like we saw beer, lahoi, roi. It just means well. And then Sheba is an interesting word. It kind of has a double meaning. It can mean 7. So you have the 7 ewe lambs, or it can mean oath. So
It can mean what?
oath.
Oath.
So an oath and 7. It's kind of a play on words. So they named it Beersheba. He plants the tree there. And he gave the 7 new lands and as a witness that I have dug this well. And I mean, just when you put all the well stories together, I mean, this was huge. It was very essential to their survival to have these wells. And it's also very interesting that that's where another place where Abraham called on the name of the Lord, and he called on him as everlasting, the everlasting God. And so now this is where Isaac goes back to this place where Abraham called on the name of the Lord, everlasting God. Then the Lord appeared to... So I'm back in Genesis 26, beginning in verse 23. Then he went up from there to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him that the same night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. So here he actually appears to Isaac there, the same place. And, you know, I am the God of your father Abraham. And he tells him, do not fear. And we know that was one of the reasons he lied about Rebekah, is that just self-preservation. And then God's assuring him that he's with him. And I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. And up to this point, it was known. I mean, obviously, not just to Israel. They all knew. It was known, but for God to appear to him personally and just confirm this covenant, and it's at this point it becomes a personal covenant with Isaac, and not just a handed down, but a very personal. God became very personal to him. So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. So, and you know, and the Lord appeared to him, and this word in Hebrew is Yahweh, YHWH, Yahweh, and it means covenant-making, covenant-keeping God. And just such a reassurance, this thing that Abraham had, that God will keep his covenant.
You know, it was bad. It was hard being a woman back then. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of ways, it was hard being a man because they had to scrape and fight for everything they had. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it was serious enough that they were fearful all the time. It had to be a dog-eat-dog world. Yes. And then, just how prosperous Isaac was. But so he's responsible for all these lives. And, you know, and we talked about the difference between a servant who just shows up, does a day's work, gets a day's wage, and then a bond servant. And so when it used the word household, that made it sound like these are more bond servants, like they're dependent on Isaac. He took care of all their needs. They worked, and he took care of their needs. It's not like do your job, I give you a paycheck, and you go home, and you worry about budgeting. This is, you're his responsibility. And so he had enormous amount of people to care for and to think about. So, yeah, it is hard. It's hard being a man today. Yeah. All those responsibilities. Most of them don't have to fear for their lives. Not for their lives, no. And fight for their homes. Some places they do. Yes, but not here. Yes, and we're so grateful. Okay, so Isaac built the altar. And this is the first time we see him building an altar and then calling upon the name of the Lord. So beginning in verse 26, then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with his advisor Ahuzath and Pekol, the commander of his army. And Isaac said to him, why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you? And so, he didn't take a stab and filled in all my wells. He didn't take any stabs, but just, why have you come to me, since you hate me? And they said, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. And so we talk about everything brings glory to God. Everything points us to God. And so when he has a crop, that
produces 100-fold that same year. I mean, farmers are so dependent on the Lord. And I mean, that was evidence that God has blessed him. Finding water when they dig wells, that was evidence that they were not going to be able to defeat him. So, hey, we might as well be friends, since we're not even going to try to come against, if we come against you, we're coming against the Lord, and we're just not going to go there. And so he says, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we said, let there now be an oath between us, even between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what he's thinking, but that's not what I remember reading. We have done nothing but good and have sent you away in peace. So remember when he sent him away, he was too prosperous. You are now the blessed of the Lord. So I think it's what Desiree was saying, that Abraham, and that, it's obvious you are. And did you say it? One of you said it. Yeah, that you are in the lineage of Abraham. Obviously, God has his hand on you. Of course, I mean, nothing in God is without purpose. And so remember, everything is bringing us to redemption. Salvation and then reconciliation. Everything is moving us that way. So, this is what he did for Israel. It was plain to everybody. They weren't going to be able to defeat them. They weren't going to be able to run them off. So verse 30, then he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. So, I mean, I don't know. Isaac just, not a grudge holder, not a revenge, not filling our well. How many wells we had to dig? I mean, he did just nothing, just very. So, I mean, I think when the Bible talks about being peacemakers, I think this is such a good example. I mean, it would be so easy to stab or just, it would have been so easy to just put in that little extra word. And he doesn't. He refrains from any of that. They eat, they drink, they feast. And then in the morning they arose early, exchanged oaths. Then Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. Now it came about on the same day that Isaac's servants came in and told him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, we have found water. So again, just confirming. So he called it Sheba. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. So I didn't understand why Abraham named it that, then Isaac. But one of the theories was that they had filled in the well. It was no more. And so it's just reestablishing what had already been done there. And then when Moses is the one who actually recorded this, and he says to this day. So he's writing it like a long time in the future. Over 400 years later, he's writing this. And it was still Beersheba then. But I can tell you, they still talk about Beersheba in Israel. It's still a thriving, I don't know if it's thriving, but it's still an area in Israel to this day. Still there. Okay, do we have any thoughts or questions? Then we're going to kind of transition. And again, the plans of God cannot be thwarted. He had a purpose, and that's to bring about salvation. And the Philistines and all their well-filling could not thwart the plan of salvation. And that should be such a comfort.
Probably striking water would be like getting a big oil well today.
It would have been huge, yes. It just assured their survival.
They didn't have really much reason for that kind of oil yet.
No.
Mm-mm. No?
They probably thought it was rained water.
They probably did, like your friend. Okay. So any thoughts or questions, and we're going to transition to these last two verses. Okay, beginning verse 34. And when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. Bitterness, and I'm going to read it out of the Amplified. They made life bitter, and a grief of mind, and a grief of spirit, bitterness of spirit, to their parents, to the parents, Isaac and Rebekah. So, I don't even know where to start. Let's go back and look at Genesis 24 and talk about that. So Genesis 24, verses 2 and 3. And this is after Sarah's died, and they're going to go look for a wife for Isaac. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, please place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live. But you shall go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. This was so important to Abraham. And we talked about it's not forbidden to make an oath in the name of the Lord, but it was so serious. So you did not want to do this. It's a very serious thing to take an oath in the name of the Lord. And here, this is so important to Abraham. He made him swear by the name of the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that he would not take a wife from among the Canaanites. And if you'll remember our genealogy in Genesis chapter 10, Noah had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And then Ham was cursed because he walked in on his dad, exposed his dad's nakedness. And so Ham was cursed, but the curse was cursed to be Canaan. So Ham had a son named Canaan. And then Canaan, from Canaan came a son named Heth, and they became the Hittites. So Canaan had several sons, but among them are the Hittites. And so it was very important that he didn't marry anyone from among those tribes, which is where they were living at the time. Elise had pointed out at this point, like what we said with Sarah, they're preserving the lineage of Christ. At the same time, we cannot overlook the fact Rahab was a Canaanite, and she's in the lineage of Christ. Ruth is a Moabite. She's in the lineage of Christ. So this is not about ethnicity. This is about the God whom we serve. And we'll read about King Solomon in a minute. But I want to look at one more aspect of this. So back to Genesis 26, 34 and 35. So not only does Esau marry a Hittite, he marries 2. And this would have been, this was like blatant rebellion from what I read. This would have been total rebellion.
He's ticked off about that.
I know. We're going to see more about Esau next week, but this would have been a very rebellious. There was nothing that said take 2 wives. And he took 2 Hittite women, and of course his parents knew, and this was a great grief to them. But I want us to just be reminded of why. Of course, Rahab is in the lineage of Christ because she believed God and feared Him, and she feared God more than she feared man. Ruth so wanted God to be her God and His people to be her people, and she wanted to be. So there's no indication that these Hittite women were God-fearers. So let's look at this. Did I put that in your notes, 1 Kings?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't put it in mine. That's funny. 1 Kings chapter 11. And I'll read these first 4 verses. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, neither shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. Solomon had held fast to these in love, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. I'm not sure how he held fast to all of them in love, but my goodness. Well, that is key. His wives turned his heart away. For it came about when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. So these women who worshipped other gods, like in James it talks about a double-minded man. This is what comes to mind. When we're pursuing holiness, when we are fleeing youthful lust, pursuing holiness, this is a singleness of mind, and we have eyes for him only, and we seek to please him only, and this is what this did. It turned his heart away. It was not wholly devoted to the Lord. It was half-hearted devotion, not fully devoted to the Lord. And that's what I just think about with holiness. What that means is just single-mindedness. And so that was the reason for not intermarrying with these women. They had pagan gods. And, we saw it in the Tower of Babel, and it just seems like our culture is going, back to the Tower of Babel, where everything God is separated out. He separated out Abraham. He separated out this lineage. He never wanted us to compromise, I don't know what the word is, but he never wanted us to be one with the world. He wants us to come out and be ye separate. What do light and darkness have in common? Do not be unequally yoked. And I know we like to use that for marriage, and it's an excellent advice for marriage. Do not be unequally yoked. But it's not limited to marriage. It's limited to anything that we would do. We are just not to be one with the world, because when we were talking about the Ten Commandments and we're looking at the jealousy of God, he's a jealous God. That word, what it means is that God has such a zeal to come against anything that would hinder our holiness. And that's what he's doing. He's just so passionate about so passionate about us keeping holiness, things set apart. He's so passionate about that. He doesn't want anything in our lives that would hinder our holiness. And that's what these women did for Solomon. They turned his heart. He just so wants us to be pure. And because when all is said and done, that's all that's going to matter, is a heart that's fully devoted to him.
He wasn't so wise after all in some way.
I know.
I was thinking about that.
See, I know we talked about that in Sunday school. It's like,
Didn't Solomon build God an amazing temple and then turn around and start to build his own bigger than God's?
I don't remember that, but he did an amazing temple.
that's just not wise to me.
I know. And it goes on. He says it several times in verse 9. Now the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice.
He just didn't listen. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he got worse, as he got older.
And it's because of that the whole entire nation of Israel split into two, and he said it's directly a direct result. He said, however, let me see what he says for sure, for word. Because you have done this and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. And so after Solomon's death, the kingdom was divided, and one went to his son, and that's what we know of as Judah. When you read in the Old Testament, there's Judah, and then there's Israel. So Israel became the northern part of Israel. And in keeping your kings and stuff straight, no good king ever came from Israel. But Judah would have good kings and bad kings, but that's the one that remained in Solomon's lineage. But the northern half went astray and never had a good king. All of that because Solomon's heart was not fully devoted. Consequences. Okay. We'll stop there. We'll pick up in chapter 27 next week.